You wake up tomorrow morning, you check your phone. Every news station is flashing the same headline. Federal Reserve announces emergency monetary reset. All currency notes above $20 no longer valid. Citizens have 72 hours to exchange at designated locations. Your heart drops. You run to your wallet. $300 cash, your emergency fund, $5,000 under the mattress, your grandmother's life savings, $10,000 in a safe. All of it, suddenly, may be worthless. You think this can't happen in America, but it already has. And around the world in the last 50 years alone, it's happened 6 times. Not gradually, not with warning. Overnight, millions of people went to bed middle class and woke up with nothing. Their money didn't lose value slowly. It was erased, canceled, declared invalid by government decree. And if you think the United States is immune, if you believe the dollar is untouchable, you need to hear these stories. Because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, America is humming the same tune every collapsed currency once sang. If you want to understand what's really at stake in the next decade, if you want to see the warning signs the financial media won't talk about, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this channel digs into the patterns, the history, the cycles that reveal where the world is heading. And what you're about to hear will change the way you think about money forever. So let's be clear about what we're talking about. This isn't inflation. Inflation is when your dollar buys less bread over time. That's painful, but it's predictable. What we're discussing is something far more violent. Instant cancellation, demonetization, currency reset. One day your money is legal tender. The next day, it's paper. The government declares certain notes invalid. You have a narrow window, maybe hours, maybe days, to exchange them at a bank. But the banks are overwhelmed. The lines stretch for blocks. Rural areas have no access. And by the time you get there, if you get there, the exchange rate has been gutted. You trade 100 old dollars for 10 new ones. Your savings evaporate. Why does this happen? Governments claim it's to fight corruption, to stop black market money, to control inflation, to modernize the economy. But the real reason is always the same: control. When a government loses control of its currency, when inflation spirals, when debt becomes unmanageable, when trust collapses, the nuclear option is to reset the board. Wipe the slate clean, and the people holding cash pay the price. Now you might think that's something that happens in dictatorships, in unstable countries, in places without rule of law. But here's the thing. The United States has already done this. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, forcing Americans to turn in their gold in exchange for paper dollars at a fixed rate. Then the government raised the price of gold, devaluing every dollar overnight. In 1971, Richard Nixon ended the convertibility of the dollar to gold without warning. The entire global financial system was restructured in a weekend. So the precedent is there. The mechanism exists. And around the world, the pattern has played out again and again. Case 1, Soviet Union, 1991. For 70 years, the Soviet ruble was the currency of a superpower. It wasn't strong, but it was stable within the system. People saved in rubles. Pensions were paid in rubles. Life revolved around rubles. Then, in January 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev announces a sudden currency reform. All 50 and 100 ruble notes are invalid. Citizens have 3 days to exchange them at banks. But there's a limit. You can only exchange a small amount. The rest, gone. People panic. Lines form outside banks that stretch for miles. In rural Siberia, there are no banks nearby. Entire villages lose everything. Life savings, decades of work, vanished in 72 hours. The government claims it's to fight black market speculators, but the real reason is desperation. The Soviet economy is collapsing. Inflation is rising. The government has lost control, and so they hit the reset button. But it doesn't work. Trust in the ruble evaporates completely. By December 1991, the Soviet Union is dissolved. The ruble continues to collapse. People hoard dollars, Deutschmarks, anything but rubles. And within a few years, hyperinflation wipes out whatever wealth remained. Here's the lesson. Even a superpower, a nuclear-armed empire that controlled half of Europe, was not immune. When the currency dies, the state follows, and it happens faster than anyone expects. North Korea, 2009. North Korea is one of the most isolated, controlled nations on Earth. The government monitors everything. And yet, Even there, people find ways to save, to trade, to accumulate small amounts of wealth in cash. In November 2009, the regime announces a currency redenomination. The old yuan is being replaced with a new one. The exchange rate, 100 to 1. You have 1 week to exchange your money. But there's a cap. You can only exchange the equivalent of about 40 US dollars. Anything beyond that is worthless. Imagine that. You've saved for years. You have the equivalent of $400 hidden away. Suddenly, you can only exchange 40, the other 360. Confiscated, gone. The public outrage is so intense that riots break out in multiple cities. Even in North Korea, where dissent is a death sentence. The regime executes the official who designed the plan, trying to deflect blame. But the damage is done. The North Korean won loses all remaining trust. People turn to foreign currency, to bartering, to black market Chinese yuan. The government tried to reset the system and instead destroyed what little economic function remained. The message is clear. Even the most authoritarian regime cannot simply erase money without consequences. But they will try, and the people always pay first. Case 3, Myanmar, 1987. Burma, now Myanmar, is under the rule of General Ne Win, a dictator obsessed with numerology and control. The economy is struggling. Inflation is rising. The black market is thriving. So on September 5, 1987, Ne Win makes an announcement. All 25, 35, and 75 kyat notes are no longer legal tender. 75% of the currency in circulation is invalidated. No warning, no exchange. Just gone. His reasoning, those denominations are unlucky. He replaces them with 45 and 90 kyat notes because those are divisible by 9, his lucky number. This isn't economic policy. This is madness. But the result is devastatingly real. Students lose their tuition savings, families lose their emergency funds, workers who are paid in cash have nothing. The middle class is destroyed overnight. And this time, the people don't stay quiet. Student protests erupt. They grow into a nationwide uprising. The military cracks down violently, killing thousands. The regime survives barely, but the country is shattered. And the kyat never recovers its legitimacy. For decades afterward, people in Myanmar distrust their own currency, preferring dollars or gold. This case shows something critical. When you destroy money overnight, you don't just destroy wealth, you destroy trust. And once trust is gone, it doesn't come back. Case 4, Ghana, 1982. Ghana is a relatively young nation, still finding its footing after independence. The economy is unstable. Military coups have become routine, and in 1982, Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings seizes power. One of his first acts, a currency recall. All 50 cedi notes are declared invalid. Citizens are told they must exchange them at banks within a short window. But here's the problem. Most Ghanaians don't live near banks. Rural villages are hours away from the nearest branch. Roads are terrible. Communication is slow. By the time many people hear about the currency change, the deadline has passed. Entire communities lose their savings. Not because they were criminals, not because they were corrupt, but because they were poor, rural, and disconnected. The government offers no compensation, no extension. The money is simply gone. And here's what happens next. Trust in the cedi collapses. People stop using banks. They stop saving in local currency. They turn to informal systems, barter, foreign currency, anything they can hold that won't be erased by decree. Ghana's economy stagnates for years. The lesson: when you punish the innocent along with the guilty, when you make no distinction between the corrupt and the common citizen, you destroy the entire system, and Ghana is still rebuilding that trust today. Case 5, Argentina and Brazil. Repeat currency deaths. If the first 4 cases were shocking, Argentina and Brazil show something even more disturbing. It can happen again and again and again. Argentina has experienced currency collapse so many times that people have stopped counting. In 1983, the peso ley is replaced by the peso argentino at a 10,000 to 1 rate. In 1985, the austral replaces the peso argentino at another 10,000 to 1. In 1992, the peso replaces the austral at 10,000 to 1. That's 3 total wipeouts in less than a decade. Each time, savings are erased. Pensions become worthless. The middle class is devastated, And each time, the government promises this is the last time this currency will be stable, but it never is. Because the underlying problem, endless government spending, money printing, debt, never gets fixed. Brazil follows a nearly identical path. The Cruzeiro becomes the Cruzado in 1986. The Cruzado becomes the Cruzeiro again in 1990. Then the Cruzeiro Real in 1993. Then the Real in 1994. For currency changes in 8 years, imagine that, you save for retirement. The currency changes, your savings are cut in half. You rebuild. It happens again and again and again. By the 4th time, you stop trusting the system entirely. You stop saving. You spend everything immediately because holding cash is guaranteed loss. This is the death spiral, and once it starts, it's nearly impossible to stop. The governments of Argentina and Brazil eventually stabilized, sort of, but the psychological damage remains. An entire generation learned that money is not a store of value, it's a hot potato. And that lesson doesn't go away. Case 6, the United States, 1971. Let's talk about America, because if you think this is something that only happens elsewhere, you're wrong. On the evening of August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon appears on television. He announces that the United States will no longer convert dollars to gold. This is called closing the gold window. Up until that moment, foreign governments could exchange dollars for gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. That backing gave the dollar credibility. It was the foundation of the global financial system established at Bretton Woods in 1944, and Nixon ended it in a 15-minute speech on a Sunday night. No congressional debate, no public vote, no warning. Overnight, the dollar went from being backed by gold to being backed by nothing but trust and military power. And here's what happened next. Inflation exploded. In the 1970s, the dollar lost more than half its value. Gas prices quadrupled. Wages stagnated. The middle class was squeezed. And since 1971, the dollar has lost more than 90% of its purchasing power. Now, this wasn't a demonetization in the traditional sense. Americans didn't have to turn in their dollars. But the nature of the dollar changed instantly. It was a reset, a transformation, and the American people had no say in it. The precedent is clear. The U.S. government has already shown it will fundamentally alter the currency system, without warning, when it feels it must, and it can do it again. So why should America pay attention now? Because all the warning signs are flashing red. The national debt is over $35 trillion and growing by $1 trillion roughly every 100 days. The Federal Reserve has printed more money in the last 15 years than in the previous 2 centuries. Inflation, real inflation that people feel at the grocery store, is far higher than official numbers admit. The dollar's share of global reserves is quietly declining. Countries like China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia are exploring alternatives. Oil deals in yuan. Trade settled in local currencies. BRICS nations discussing a new reserve system. And then there's the rise of central bank digital currencies. The Federal Reserve is researching a digital dollar. If that launches, the government will have unprecedented control. They will know every transaction. They can freeze accounts instantly. They can set expiration dates on money, forcing you to spend or lose it. They can program the currency itself. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is stated policy. And if a crisis hits, if inflation spirals, if confidence collapses, a digital currency gives the government the perfect tool to reset the system overnight. Erase old dollars, issue new digital dollars. Control the exchange rate. Control who gets access. It would be demonetization on steroids. And it could happen faster than any of the 6 cases we just discussed. So who loses when money dies? It's not the ultra-wealthy. They hold assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, gold, businesses. Their wealth isn't in paper. It's in things. It's the savers who lose. The people who did everything right, who worked hard, who put money in the bank, who trusted the system. Retirees on fixed incomes, middle-class families with emergency funds, workers who are paid in cash, small business owners with cash reserves. They're the ones holding the bag when the currency resets. And history shows it happens fast. No time to prepare, no time to move your wealth. One day, you're secure. The next day, you're starting over. The wealthy know this. That's why billionaires buy land, art, gold, assets that can't be printed. That's why central banks around the world are stockpiling gold at record levels. They're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because they see the same thing you're seeing now. The system is fragile, and when it breaks, paper burns first. So could this happen in America again? Not necessarily in the same form. The US probably won't invalidate physical cash the way the Soviets or North Koreans did, a shift away from reserve currency status. Absolutely. In fact, it's already happening in slow motion. The purchasing power of the dollar has been quietly destroyed for 50 years. But slow motion can become fast motion if a debt crisis hits, if a major war disrupts global trade, if confidence in treasury bonds collapses, if inflation becomes uncontrollable. Any of those triggers could force a rapid, dramatic reset. And the people who don't see it coming, who trust that the system will protect them, will be the ones who lose everything. Here's the final warning. Every empire that fell believed it was different. Rome thought it would last forever. Britain thought the pound was eternal. The Soviet Union thought communism was the future. They were all wrong, not because they were stupid, but because they couldn't imagine their own collapse. It's a psychological blindness, and America suffers from it too. We look at these 6 cases and we think, that's them, not us. But the mechanics are the same. The debt, the printing, the inflation, the loss of trust, the cycle is identical. The US is not standing at the beginning of this story. It's standing near the end. And history doesn't repeat exactly, but it echoes loudly. The Soviet Union collapsed in months. Myanmar exploded in weeks. North Korea reset in days. Argentina cycled through currencies like they were seasons. And the United States, the most powerful nation on earth, already proved it will change the rules of money without asking permission. The question isn't whether a reset is possible. The question is what form it will take, and whether you'll be ready when it does. Because when money dies, it dies fast. And the only people who survive are the ones who saw it coming.